everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Ultimate Job Search and Career Podcast with me, your host, bon vivant and former CEO, Bill, the company's expert. And on today's episode, we're going to be taking several questions that were sent in by my awesome viewers/listeners. And we're going to be talking about being rejected for not having enough experience. We're going to be taking a couple of questions about this and exploring how that works and what you can do about it. We're also going to be talking about ageism. Someone was awesome enough to send in a question about ageism and what you can do about it and when you will encounter it and so on. So we're going to be talking about that. And finally, another person has sent in questions about my own course, the $100 MBA. Someone who has purchased the course, they had some really awesome questions. So I thought I would share those and the answers with everyone. So that's going to be our episode. So stay tuned. Before we get to that, just very briefly, a word to all my viewers slash listeners. I don't know what you call it. A video that you listen to. I don't know if it's that a viewer or a listener. Anyway, it's whatever you want it to be. That's the magic of this whole thing. Also, I want to draw everybody's attention to the fact that you can join my main channel as a member and receive members-only videos. You get access to that. And also, I have a Patreon account, so you can also support this channel there. And all the support that I get from the Patreon and the members, I channel directly into upgrading my channel with better equipment, better video and audio equipment that leads to improvement. So there you go. Whatever vehicle you like to use for that stuff is all good. Now, with a battle cry of no es muy bien, let's engage. Let's talk about being rejected for not having enough experience. Now, a couple of people sent in some questions here. And the first is some awesome individual by the name of Hamid Hashemi, if I'm saying that right. Hamid Hashemi. Hamid left a comment on one of my videos and says, "You are even more awesome." Wow. Okay, I have a problem and I don't know what to do. The problem is I'm an MSc, so Master of Science, graduate in food science. So I entered a job world a little late. And also, I quit my first job because of low income. And then I got rejected many times just because I didn't know the interview principles. That's principles spelled P-A-L-S. So I guess the people at the interviews. So I did what I could. So I did plenty of jobs in different fields than my study. Okay, so you worked in other areas than food science, which is what you qualified for. Now I'm 34 years old, but with little experience in every area. So I get rejected for low experience. What should I do? Okay, excellent question, Hamid. I personally guarantee that you are certainly not alone. Many people are in this position, and I personally can relate to it because my story is similar. I got qualified in something and then immediately took a job out of school in a different field. And at the time, you think that's fine, but later on in your career, it causes some conflict because you were qualified in one field, but don't have any real experience in it, whereas you don't have any education in a second field, but that's the field that you have a lot of experience in. So it leads to a dilemma. It leads to you being considered less than perfect for either of those careers. And that can be an issue for a lot of people. Okay, so Hamid basically says, what should I do now? Well, listen, if you have listened to my podcast before, I hate to sound like a broken record because what I'm going to do is I'm basically going to recommend that you get jobs on the hidden job market, which is curiously a solution to a lot of problems when you break the mold of the ideal candidate. Okay, if you are getting jobs by looking for job postings and then responding to a job posting with a job application, okay, that can be a very successful way of getting a job if you fit the default profile of a job seeker, which is someone who has education in a certain field, and then they have a series of progressively advanced jobs and therefore experience in that same field. And you're applying for a job that is a natural progression of that experience. Okay, if that's you, then that is a perfectly legitimate and rewarding way to find a job. However, if you don't fit into that mold, okay, that method, that vector of getting a job can be disappointing. Because the problem is that you are being evaluated by recruiters, at least in the early stages of all these recruitment operations. In the opening stages, you are evaluated by a recruiter. Now, a recruiter, by definition, doesn't know the details and doesn't have any personal experience in the jobs that they are recruiting for, okay? So they are basing decisions based on a few assumptions. And one of these assumptions is what we're directly dealing with here, which is years of experience. This is based on the idea that more years of experience means more value, okay? Now, as we all know, in reality, that certainly is not a hard, fast rule, right? There are a lot of people that are very, very experienced at doing a terrible job. And unfortunately, according to these principles, those people would be a shoo-in for a new job, whereas other more talented, more hardworking, and more intelligent people who have slightly less experience would not get those jobs. This is the tragedy of basically the recruiting process. A lot of these assumptions that they make are incorrect, okay? And if they're incorrect for you, then playing this game will not be that successful, unfortunately. But there's good news, and the good news is that most people don't actually play this game. Most people don't get jobs using this method. They don't wait for a job posting. They don't respond to a publicly posted job with a job application, and they don't go through the standard HR channels to get a job. In fact, most people get jobs through networking. Networking simply means you have a personal connection to someone who is making the decision as to who gets hired. Okay? Now, when you first mention this, getting a job through networking, a lot of people have the assumption that, oh, nepotism. You know, you got the job because you know the person hiring. I get it. You're not actually the most qualified person for the job, but you got it because of essentially corruption. No, that's not what I'm talking about. That's in the vast majority of cases, that is not exactly what's going on. Well, it's not what's going on, period. It's not remotely what's going on. The reason why people get jobs through networking is because before the hiring manager spends time, money, and effort on a recruitment campaign, a candidate presents themselves to the hiring manager and saying, hey, I'm right here. I'm looking for a job. I solve this problem, and I am very talented in this area. If ever you are looking for someone who can do that, let me know, because I'm enthusiastic and I'm qualified and I'm looking to work at your company. Now, when that happens, the hiring manager thinks, okay, first of all, this person has stood out from the crowd. This candidate has stood out from all the others because they're in front of me making a case for themselves. Nobody else is. Just this one candidate. And they are not here because they're responding to a job ad. They're here because they think that maybe I might be hiring somebody. And that tends to suggest that they're interested in this company, not necessarily a specific job. So it's not just a financial transaction. There might be some genuine enthusiasm for working at this company here. And then on top of that, they are demonstrating several abilities they have. They're demonstrating their initiative to be able to do this. They're demonstrating their communication skills. They're demonstrating their professionalism and making a good impression. And all those things, I'm not having to assess secondhand. I can see firsthand that they have those things. And if the candidate is charismatic and I'm liking interacting with them so far, that says something. That says that that suggests that I will enjoy interacting with them if I were to hire them. So you've got all those advantages before you even do a job interview. So that's one of the reasons that getting a job through networking is very powerful. Now, if this is a persistent problem, so for Hamid, who has sent this question, if this is a one-time only thing, you're just discovering this now, is the first time you're encountering this problem, you don't necessarily have to change anything you're doing. Just keep at it, keep applying for jobs, and it's a numbers game. Sooner or later, something will come along. However, if this is something that has been a persistent problem for you, or you have been looking for a job for an unreasonably long time and making astoundingly little progress, in the sense that not many people are giving you interviews, or you're not passing interviews, and you suspect that there's something else going on, maybe there's some systemic problem with your education and your work history, then I would suggest focusing your job search on networking rather than applying for posted jobs. Okay, now, on my main YouTube channel, The Company's Expert, I've done many videos on how to do this. Okay, you can discover jobs quite easily using tools like Google Maps and LinkedIn. Okay, you can find not only the companies around you in your industry, but like if you're in food science, you could easily go to Google. Go to Google and type in the name of your city or hometown, wherever you are, or your region. And then once you do that, you'll be looking at a map of your city, okay, in Google Maps. Then go to the search box at the top and type in food science, okay, or food industry, or any other term that would describe employers in your industry, okay? So if you do that, what'll happen is on the map that you're looking at of your hometown, businesses will start popping up that are in the food science industry, or the if you just type in food industry or any other word. I mean, like, I don't know if that goes if things like restaurant are included in that. Probably not. If you're maybe a food science researcher or something like that. Okay, but whatever search terms you type in that are in your industry, different businesses will pop up, and these are very likely to be employers that are going to be looking for people at some point that have a qualification in food science. Okay, so already you're shortlisting. These are some of the employers that you're going to be paying attention to. These have potential to hire you. And then using tools like LinkedIn, you can then see inside those organizations to who the potential hiring managers are. And it also is a vehicle for you to learn about those people. You see their profile, their resume, and then you can also message them directly. Okay. So using these tools, it's very easy, just from the comfort of your own home, to find all the employers around you, find all the people within those companies that have potential to hire people. So these are the people that are going to be making the decisions to hire people like you in your chosen field. And you have the ability to communicate with them directly. Okay. So you have all the tools at your fingertips right there. Okay, you don't have to wait for a posted job necessarily. While you're at it, you could check the websites of all these companies to see if they are looking for people, if they do have posted jobs. You know, and you could go that way, which is fine, but I would advocate more for the direct approach, where you proactively contact these people. Just send out a template message with words to the effect of, "Hello, I'm here. I have a Master of Science in food science. I'm very interested in working at your company. I solve this type of problem. And if ever you're looking for someone who can do that, please don't hesitate to contact me." And what's going to happen is that most of those will hit these recipients when they're not actually looking to hire for somebody. Okay, the odds are is that, most people at any given time will not be hiring, but some people will. So it's a numbers game. You send out 100 of this message, you get a certain percentage of responses. You send out 500, you get the same percentage of responses. So if you want X many interviews, you just multiply it by that number. And I know what I'm talking about here. I mean, I've used this method to get all my consulting business for the last 8 years, 9 years, something like that. I've used this exclusively without actually having to add different methods. And this works. So that's an example of getting a job through networking. And the reason you get the job is because they just happen to need somebody. And before they start doing a full-blown job search where they get HR involved, they write a job description and they canvass the job and they start interviewing people and making short lists and paring it down and doing background checks. Before they do any of that, at the very beginning, when they know they need to hire somebody, you show up and you say, "Hi, I can do the exact thing you're looking for. Would you like to talk?" And they'll say, "Hey, yeah, I would like to talk." And they're thinking like, well, if this person works out, this could be really lucky because then I save myself the entire job search experience. I don't have to pay for it. I don't have to do any of the work. I just check this person out first. Now, if they don't work, I still have to do all that business. But if they do work out, I could save myself a ton of work, a ton of money, and a ton of effort here. And so, yes, I'm all for that. Okay, so that's how that works. So that's one. Hopefully, that's something to give you some ideas of what to look at. As I say, if you're looking to go deeper into that, I have some videos on my main channel, The Company's Expert. And beyond that, I have a course called Get Hired, and it goes deeper, much deeper into this with scripts and exact methods of exactly how you do this. Okay, so hopefully that helps. Special thanks to Hamid Hashemi for sending this in. That's an excellent question, and you, my friend, are not alone. Many people are experiencing this. Okay, let's go to another question that another one of my awesome viewers / listeners sent in. This is from Robo Knight. And Robo Knight asks something very similar. He says, "My biggest gripe is how am I supposed to get any experience if nobody gives it to me in the first place? That's how people's resumes can get stagnant." You, my friend, are absolutely correct. I'm not sure if you're a he or a she. It doesn't really matter, Robo Knight, but you are bang on in this, and you have put your finger on one of the major problems with recruitment theory, which is a lot of those assumptions I was mentioning a moment ago. They're wrong. The assumptions are made as a time saver and as a best indicator of suitability of a candidate. They are well known that they're right more than 50% of the time, but not by much more than 50%. Okay, and this is a problem. For example, if recruiters value your value, essentially they estimate your value by how many years of experience you have, then it's not possible to change careers. That's a fact. This is a well-known thing that, if you start on any career path, there are forces that are keeping you going down that career path. It's very hard to change because if you change your career, you're starting from zero experience again. And in this day and age where people recruiters have a delightful combination of not knowing about the jobs that they recruit for. They don't understand the jobs themselves. So therefore they don't understand what skills are necessary and what aren't. But also this fallacy that years of experience are a way of assessing a candidate's value. I mean, that's a very rough indicator, and sometimes it's accurate, but in a lot of cases it's not. And everybody knows this, but the problem is, if that's the criteria they're using, it's hard to overcome that. So once again, to Robo Knight, you're asking a question, how can I get experience if nobody gives it to me? Well, I've already given my number one suggestion, which would be to apply for a job through networking, because when you are dealing with a hiring manager, they're not looking at years of experience as the primary way of assessing you. That might be a factor later on, but the primary thing that they're looking for is, do they like you? And the skills that you're demonstrating by contacting them, which are namely communication skills, professional skills, and initiative, okay, are those sufficient to impress them? And then the whole point of contacting them is to be able to have a conversation with them. After you have that conversation, do they like you as a person? Are you someone that they would want to work with? Okay, so if they're adding someone to their team, they know the types of people that they work well with, and they know the types of people that their team would probably want to work with. So they're thinking like, okay, would you fit in well with the team? Right? So that's what you're being evaluated on primarily. Okay. And then later on, when you submit a resume and you say, well, here's the details of my education and experience, those play a factor too, but they're a minor role. Okay. Assuming you haven't been lying when you made your pitch, when you sent the initial message, assuming that's true, then, your resume and stuff is going to matter, but it's going to be a minor thing. Okay. So, that's a way around this catch-22. Okay. Nobody gives you experience because you don't have experience, right? There's also ways around it. Okay. So that would be my primary recommendation I'd have for people that are trying to solve this problem. Get a job via networking, not through standard HR channels. Okay. Secondly, there are alternatives. Okay. Now, this is going to be a minority alternative for a lot of people, but if nobody's willing to give you a job, you create your own. You could be an entrepreneur. In this day and age, there has never been a better time to do this. Now, this is not for everyone. Okay. I want to say that. Some people just have no desire to do it, and that's the number one reason why it's not for them. If you're not interested, you're not interested. Okay? But for a lot of people, this is a valid option, and this is a lot easier than a lot of people think, especially, as I keep saying, in this day and age where you can do a lot of your marketing online for free. You're not spending money. 10 years ago or more, it was very expensive to do this stuff, to tell the world about your product. Now, there are so many channels with which you can contact an insanely large amount of people and tell them about the thing that you have, you're offering. Okay. So if you have something that's of value that a lot of people would want for a price that they agree with, then you can get a tremendous response, and you don't have to take my word on this. There's many examples of people that are succeeding, by doing their own thing, whether it's a side hustle on the side or it's their main line. Okay. I myself have been doing this type of thing for nearly 10 years, purely without working at a day job, as a private consultant, and then more recently as a YouTuber and doing things like this. Right. So, it's very possible. This is a real thing. You can refuse to play the entire game if you wish. It is possible to do this. However, you need to know what you're doing, right? And of course, here's an obvious place where I would plug my own course, but I'm not here to do that. The bottom line is that entrepreneurship is a skill like any other, and you can learn it like any other skill. There's many ways you can do this. Okay. Now, I'm going to advocate that if you want to learn business, you learn business. Okay. Don't wing it. It's like if you want to be a Hollywood actor, a good starting point would be drama school, right? It is possible to be a big Hollywood superstar without ever having gone to acting school. But most people who end up being Hollywood superstars know how to act, and they've been taught formally. So it's the same with entrepreneurship. This stuff isn't rocket science, but it is a thing that you learn like any other skill. Okay, so there's a couple of options of how you can break this mold. Number one, get a job through networking. Get a job on your merits, okay, on your initiative, on your professionalism, on your skill, rather than years of experience. Get that by approaching people, Via networking, that means it's basically you. You're not going in with 20 other candidates. You're going in just yourself. You don't have any competition. The odds are much more in your favor. And then you're selling yourself not on your track record, but on the skills that are right in front of their face that you're demonstrating. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. Those are two ways to get around this problem of no experience. And I feel for you, because there's a lot of employers today that you only have to look at posted jobs to see that, it's some of their expectations are just completely out to lunch. They're posting essentially entry-level jobs, but they want 5 years experience for it. It's ridiculous. At least that's what they say, And one of the reasons that they can get away with doing that is because most people, for whatever reason, look there instead of looking at networking. They look at the posted job market, and then they do that because it's the default thing, and everybody does the default thing, and as a result, you get some very stiff competition. Okay, look at. I would say alternative methods, but networking is not an alternative method. It's actually the predominant method when you look at how many people get hired that way. Anyway, so thank you very much to everybody who sent in questions. Those are some great questions, and there's a lot of resources there for you. And hopefully I've helped somewhat. I hope so anyway. Okay, so moving on. I got another question from another amazing viewer of mine. This is from someone called Andy Lau, if I'm saying that correctly. Andy Lau, L-A-U, Lau. Andy says, "Thank you very much, Mr. Bill. I listened to your words from beginning to the end." This was on a podcast. A wonderful mentor to many of us. Thank you very much, Andy. You're awesome. I have one question regarding the job hopping. Do you like there is an age? Okay, is there an age hindrance for job hopping? Excellent question. As I learned from other cultures, when reaching the age 35 and beyond, there will be less consideration for some career paths. Could you please shed your light on this topic in any fashion? Thank you very much, and have a nice evening. That's an excellent question, Andy. Okay, so ageism. Let's talk about ageism. Now, first of all, yes, ageism is definitely a thing. It's a real thing, okay? But I find that people don't really discuss it. I don't know. I think they don't discuss it properly. People talk about it as if it's like some kind of massive conspiracy. It's not. For example, okay, if you wanted to be a server in a restaurant, if you look at a lot of restaurants and you look at the waitresses that they employ, or the waiters, you find that they're predominantly female, they're predominantly young, and they're predominantly good looking. Okay, well, I mean, there's ageism right there. If you're a 60-year-old man trying to get a job as a waiter in a sort of a certain type of restaurant, I mean, you're going to encounter this, right? Now, is that ageism? Yes, but it's not this massive conspiracy that people are talking about. Neither is it a career-ending type situation, okay? Because, Andy, you are correct that there are some industries that would prefer candidates below the age of 35. However, for other industries and other positions, there's a nearly equal amount of industries and positions that are looking for candidates over 35. Now, the obvious example is any type of management role. If you're 20 years old and you want to be a middle manager, despite how brilliant you are, people will be biased against you because of your age. They'll simply refuse to believe that somebody so young can have the wisdom necessary to do that job. It's just that simple, right? So older candidates have a bit of an advantage in that people are making assumptions. They assume that older people are wiser. They have things like more self-control. They have things like more professionalism. They have things like better communication skills and more awareness of different perspectives. Okay. So I mean, depending on where you're looking, you're going to find all these preferences and all these assumptions. Okay. So my recommendation would be to look in industries and look at roles where you see people over the ages of 35 getting hired. You see it as a normal thing. Okay. So, yeah, I'm just scanning the question. You didn't really say what industry you're in, but yeah, like, look at that. Okay. There are some industries and roles that prefer younger people, some that prefer older people, and some that prefer sort of middle-aged people. And, you look at that. Now, the other element to this is you also have to look at the people who are making the decisions. Okay. So now this does not apply in the case of the waitress thing, because I personally have never worked in a restaurant, so I'm not sure how it works. I'm not pretending I know exactly. But to me, I would imagine that the people making the decisions of who they would hire as a waiter or a waitress or a server, it won't be a 19-year-old girl. It'll presumably be an older person. But in a lot of cases, it does matter. So, for example, if the person making the decision is 50 years old, they probably will not be biased against people that are over 35, all things being equal. So that's another factor to look for also. Okay. You look at the types of people that get those roles, and you look at the types of people making decisions. Now, the next question people are going to ask is, well, how do you do that? Well, if you don't have firsthand experience with this, another obvious way to do it is LinkedIn. Go on LinkedIn, search for a particular role in a specific location. For example, say waiter or server in a certain, in say your hometown, and see the profiles that pop up. Okay, and if everybody that pops up is like age 20 years old, that tells you something. If everybody that pops up is age 62, that tells you something else. You can usually tell by people's picture approximately what age they are. So these are kind of tools you can use to get an overall feel for different roles in different industries. Okay. So don't be too afraid of ageism, and don't be too worried about it. It may mean that you might have to change your goals or your target. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean that, you want to go to a place where they value the things that you have. And if part of that is not making judgments about you based on your age, you're going to go where people who are your age are working and they seem to be doing fine. That can help you. Okay. If you find this to be a big problem. Okay, so that's what I have to say. So thank you very much to Andy Lau for sending in this question. Another great question. A lot of people are wondering this stuff. So thank you very much. Okay, and now we move on to the final part of this episode. We got some questions here, and there's someone who has actually bought my course. This is someone by the name of Mykola Vodonichenko, if I'm saying that correctly. Mykola Vodonichenko. Now, which Vodonichenko is this? Is it the rural Saskatchewan Vodonichenkos? Is this the Sandringham Vodonichenkos? Or is this the East Borneo Vodonichenkos? I'm not sure. But Mykola Vodonichenko is awesome in that he has bought my course called the $100 MBA and has some questions and says, about this course, I saw that some books have not only different chronological editions, but also geographical ones. For example, and he shows two links. One is to a textbook that I recommend within this course. Okay. But this is the United States edition of the book. And then another link that this is the global edition of the same book. This is French. It's a French version of the book that I'm recommending. Okay. And then says, the edition you suggest seems to be the US one. Do you think that for me, who is an EU-based professional, the global or international versions of the books in your list would be a better option to purchase? Or would you still recommend the US versions? That's an excellent question, Mykola, and I thank you for bringing that up. Here's the deal. The concepts in business that are worth learning are timeless. They don't cease to exist in another country. They don't cease to exist in another language. The really important stuff doesn't even matter what edition of a textbook you buy, all things being equal, because these things are basic. It's like somebody asking me, I need to buy a math book for my child to teach them math. Which is the best book to teach 1 + 1 = 2? And I would say, well, the book doesn't really matter as long as it contains, basic addition. Books will do it. The specific book you use is not really that important as long as you learn basic addition, right? So whether you use a U.S. version, you see, I'm Canadian and I'm broadcasting from Canada, but I recommend the United States, the U.S. version of a lot of these textbooks. In some cases, it's because the books were originally written by American authors. Okay, so you get the full, unabridged, original version of it. I think that's good. Other times, it kind of doesn't really matter. So there are more people in the U.S. than Canada. U.S. is more of a presence around the world. So, if you're speaking English, I would say the U.S. edition would be a default. So it's for that reason. But if you want to take the course, if you feel more comfortable reading French, that's fine. I mean, I'm bilingual. I speak French, but my primary language is English. So I would read the book in English. If you primarily speak French and your English is your second language, sure, you can get the French version of the book. That's perfectly okay. So I'm not terribly hung up on which edition you get. All the editions of this book should be fine because they all contain the same basic concepts. Okay, but that's a great point that you brought up, because I know that that may cause some confusion for people. So thank you very much. Now, Mykola actually has a second question here. Mykola says, furthermore, what do you think about online MBA programs? I enrolled for an online MBA from Quantic School of Business and Technology. Not Harvard, but I got a scholarship, and the price is like US dollars 7,000. So $7,000 for an MBA from an accredited US school. Do you think it is worth the money and effort? It is not that strong of a diploma, but still an official one, and real knowledge can be supplemented by such courses like your $100 MBA and self-study and actual business experience. Does this make any sense to you? Yes, it certainly does, Mykola. That's a great question. See, here's the deal. There are a lot of schools out there. Now, you got to consider the source. I also offer a course in this, so you can probably guess what my bias is here. But a lot of schools are selling education on the basis that it will help you find a job. In a lot of cases, that's true. In some cases, not so much. They claim it'll make you more valuable, and sometimes it does. If you're if you're trying to hit a certain goal, get employed in a certain place. But sometimes that's an empty sales pitch. Sometimes there are people who get degrees and get certifications, and then once it's over and they get their diploma, and then they find, to their shock and horror, that they still can't find a job. Nobody is really impressed by their educational qualification, and they still have problems getting employment. Earlier in this podcast, we were talking about people in that situation where, they're not getting hired simply because they don't have enough experience. Now, if you're sitting in school and not getting job experience, you might find yourself in this situation, and you're not really impressing anyone if you got this fancy degree. Now, that is not what I would expect in the majority of situations. However, it has been known, and a lot of people are finding this. And personally, I believe that an MBA is one of the prime problem areas for this syndrome, where MBA programs are priced especially high, and a big part of that is on their supposed value for your career. And specifically, not the skills, not the intrinsic value, but the brand recognition of that educational qualification. That's how it's being sold. So a lot of universities will say, oh yeah, take an MBA from our university. It costs $50,000 plus book fees, but it'll be worth it. You will get a very high paying job immediately when you start looking for a job after you come out of school. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not. Okay. Now, here's the deal. I'm a big fan of people knowing business. I'm an entrepreneur, and I've been the CEO of a smaller company. And, there's no hocus pocus. There's no magic here. I mean, it's like the equivalent of teaching somebody 1 + 1 = 2. Does that mean that you're a highly talented, highly valuable person? Well, to a degree. But whether you learned 1 + 1 = 2 at Harvard University, or whether you learned 1 + 1 = 2 at some unaccredited school down the street, you're just as valuable. A lot of times people prey on the supposed brand value of the institution. Okay, so let's return to Mycola's question here. Mycola is saying, do you think it's worth the money or effort to get an accredited MBA that costs $7,000? $7,000 US is not unreasonable for an MBA. That's actually pretty good, I believe, in this day and age. But the question, the real thing that matters is not what I think it's worth. It's if you have ambitions of working in a certain industry or in a certain company, the real thing is what that company, how that company values your educational credential. Okay, so that's what matters. Now, how do you find that out? Well, here's one thing you can do. That's a variation of something I said earlier in this podcast. Go on LinkedIn, go and look at the people, do a people search for people working at that company. Okay, and you'll see a lot of individuals pop up, right? You can see their essentially their resume, their profile, see if any of them got an MBA before they were hired at that company. So see if it was valued, and see what number of them have an MBA. Now, if you do this search and you find that not a single person at that organization has an MBA, then chances are they don't value an MBA that much. Number one, because it's not needed, and number two, because people tend to value what they themselves have. So it's rare that someone without an MBA will think that an MBA is the be all end all, right? Conversely, if you go and you find that, okay, I can find 150 people that's employed in that organization, and 80% of them have MBAs. And if I dive into a couple of these profiles, it seems like they got their MBAs before they worked at this organization. Then that tends to indicate that this organization values MBAs, an MBA, as a educational qualification. Most of the people there seem to have one, and they seem to have got it before they were hired at that organization. So that tends to indicate that they would place value on it. So in that case, if that's your ambition of working at that organization or in organizations like it in the industry, I would say it does make sense. Look at where they got their MBAs. Are they, all from Harvard and Yale, or are they from like a bunch of places you never heard of? That'll tell you something too. Okay, so these are things you can do that should give you a general indication about how your target employers feel about these different qualifications. Okay, so that's what I would say to that. So thank you very much to Mykola Vidonichenko of the East Borneo Vidonichenkos for sending in that question. You are awesome, and you are doubly and triply awesome for buying my course. I hope it's serving you well. And if you have any questions, let me know. Okay. Well, listen, this is probably the record for the longest podcast I've done, so I'm probably going to sign off right now. Thank you so much for listening. You guys are awesome. I wish you nothing but the best. Check out my regular channels. I've got 2 YouTube channels, The Company's Expert and The Company's Expert 2. So check out both of those. Subscribe to them both. Watch some of my videos. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. As I said, if I can answer your questions simply, quickly in the comments, I will. If I can't, then I may talk about them on the podcast. Thanks again. Have a great week. You guys are awesome, and I'll see you on the next episode. Take care.